What happens if Bitcoin's price drops? Miners can't cover their electricity costs. They start shutting off their rigs, hash rate falls, the network slows down, fees spike, users leave, price drops further, more miners quit, and eventually the whole thing collapses in on itself like a dying star. If you haven't heard of this theory before, it's called the miner death spiral, and it's one of the most persistent fears in Bitcoin. Every bear market, it comes back, like so many other FUD narratives. People on social media start posting charts of hash rate declining, miners capitulating, and they say, this is it. This is how Bitcoin dies. And if it's not dead yet, this is guaranteed what's going to happen in the future. And if you don't understand how Bitcoin's mining protocol, how the Bitcoin protocol works, and what the difficulty adjustment is, this might sound terrifying. It sounds as if it's a real structural vulnerability, but it's not. And in today's video, I'm going to explain why. So to start off, here's how the theory goes. It should be taken seriously before we tear it apart, of course. So it starts with Bitcoin miners spend real money on electricity and hardware to mine new blocks. They get paid in Bitcoin, so if the price of Bitcoin drops, their revenue drops with it. At some point, the cost to mine exceeds what the mined Bitcoin is worth. Miners start operating at a loss as a result. Rational miners shut down, hash rate drops, and when hash rate drops, blocks take longer to find, so the network slows down, transactions take longer to confirm, users get frustrated, lose confidence, and sell. That causes the price to drop even more, and that makes even more miners unprofitable. They shut off, hash rate falls again, and so on in a negative feedback loop until there's no one left mining and the network just grinds to a halt, and that's it. That's the death spiral. And on paper, it sounds like it makes sense. It's a logical feedback loop, and if Bitcoin worked the way most people think it does, it would be a real problem, but that's not the case. So this has already been tested, right? Before we even get into why, let's look at a little bit of the historical record, because this part is not hypothetical. Bitcoin's been through situations that should have triggered a death spiral if the theory were accurate. For example, China's mining ban in 2021, the Chinese government banned Bitcoin overnight, and at the time, China accounted for somewhere around 50% of all global hash rate. Half the network disappeared in a matter of weeks. And if the death spiral theory were real, this would have been the moment that it happened. Hash rate was cut in half and blocks did slow down temporarily. But of course, the network adjusted. New miners came online in other countries. Hash rate recovered within about 6 months and then hit new all-time highs. In the 2018 bear market, Bitcoin dropped from 20,000 to 3,200. Miners were getting destroyed, many were shut off, and hash rate declined for several months. The same thing happened. The network adjusted, Bitcoin kept producing blocks, and prices eventually recovered. 2022 bear market, same thing pretty much. Bitcoin dropped from 69,000 to 15,000. Some major mining companies went bankrupt, and hash rate dipped. You already know what happened. The network adjusted. And every single time this theory should have played out, it didn't. And the reason it didn't is the same thing every time. It has to do with something called the difficulty adjustment. This is the part the death spiral crowd either doesn't understand or doesn't mention for some reason. Every 2016 blocks, or about every 2 weeks, the Bitcoin protocol automatically recalibrates how hard it is to mine a block. That's what the difficulty adjustment is. And here's how it works. If blocks are being found faster than every 10 minutes, it means there's a lot of hash rate on the network. Difficulty goes up to compensate and slow things back down. If blocks are being found slower than every 10 minutes, that means hash rate is dropped and difficulty drops to make mining easier. And this is an automatic process. No one votes on it, decides it, approves it. It's just programmed into the protocol, and it's been working as intended since day one. So when miners shut off and hash rate drops, yeah, blocks temporarily slow down, but within 2 weeks at most, difficulty just adjusts downward, and now the remaining miners can find blocks more easily. Their costs go down. Mining becomes profitable again at the new lower difficulty level. The death spiral can't spiral because the protocol catches it every 2 weeks and corrects course. You can sort of think of it like a thermostat. If the temperature drops, the heat kicks on. It's a system designed to stay in balance. Satoshi built this into Bitcoin from the very beginning, and it's one of the most underappreciated aspects of the entire protocol, really. And here's where it gets counterintuitive, and it's kind of my favorite part of the whole topic, Because when miners leave, Bitcoin doesn't get weaker. In a way, it gets stronger and harder to kill. When difficulty drops, the cost to mine a single Bitcoin drops with it. That means miners who were previously unprofitable can turn their machines back on. It also means that new, smaller miners can enter the game because the barrier to entry just got lower. And this all sounds like common sense to those of us who have been studying this for a while, but apparently there's a lot of people who just don't get this, and none of this factors into their equation because the network has a built-in incentive structure that pulls miners back in whenever too many leave. It's a self-correcting system. The worse things get, the more attractive it becomes for someone to step in and start mining. So basically, while yes, a lower hash rate makes the network weaker, it's not going to stay low for that long. It never has, and it never will. So say Bitcoin dropped 90% to 7,000 something. Difficulty would adjust so far down that someone with a basic mining rig and cheap electricity could mine profitably. You'd have hobbyists, enthusiasts, ideological Bitcoiners keeping the network alive at minimal cost. The network doesn't necessarily need industrial scale mining to survive, even though it looks like that because that's where most of the hash rate comes from now, which it wasn't always like that, by the way. It just needs anyone running the software. Bitcoin operated for many years with almost no hash rate by today's standards. It was less than 1% of today's hash rate for a long time. It worked then, and it would work in a reduced state again if it ever came to that. Something else nobody seems to mention is how tiny the hash rate was in the early years compared to how it is today. So even a massive drop in hash rate today would still keep the network very strong. But anyway, why this narrative keeps coming back. So if the death spiral theory has been debunked by both the protocol's design and over a decade of real-world stress tests, why does it keep resurfacing? Well, it sounds intuitive. I mean, the feedback loop logic sounds reasonable to anyone who hasn't studied the difficulty adjustment. Most people in Bitcoin and crypto, even those who've been around for a while, don't fully understand the mechanics of mining. And I'm not claiming that I have a 100% perfect understanding of everything related to mining, but the difficulty adjustment is not really that hard to understand. Second thing, it gets clicks, fear sells, Bitcoin's going to die, is always going to outperform. Bitcoin has a self-correcting mechanism that prevents this exact scenario. Media outlets and social media accounts know this, of course. And third, some people pushing this narrative have something to gain from it, like I've covered with other FUD narratives in the past, whether they're short Bitcoin, promoting a competing project, or just building an audience through fear. There's often an incentive behind the noise. Not always, but often enough to take into consideration. So to close out, the miner death spiral might sound scary, but it relies on ignoring one of the most fundamental features of Bitcoin's design, the difficulty adjustment. Every 2 weeks, the protocol self-corrects, and it's done that without fail for 17 years. More than 17 now. Bitcoin has survived a 50% hash rate wipeout, multiple 80+% crashes in price, minor bankruptcies, government bans, and every exact version of this exact fear narrative. The network kept producing blocks through all of it, no problem. And that's just how it's engineered to work. If you found value here, share this video with someone who's worried about the death spiral. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.